The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad in simple English, part 6 of 15, chapter 2 and Madhu Kanda both concluded, sections 4, 5 and 6. This part deals with the sage Yagyavalkya teaching his wife Maitreyi about the Absolute Self, about the Supreme Brahm, and with the Honey Doctrine of the Dhyan, which teaches about the mutual dependence of beings and the universe and their oneness with the Supreme Brahm. The line of teachers and pupils is also given in brief. Sage Yagyavalkya had two wives, Maitreyi and Katyayani. When he decided to renounce the life of a householder and go to the forest, he said to his wife Maitreyi, I am about to renounce this life of a householder and go away to the forest. I would like to make a final settlement between you and Katyayani. Maitreyi replied, My lord, if this whole earth filled with wealth were mine, would I become immortal through that? No, replied Yagyavalkya. Your life would only become like the life of the rich. Of immortality, however, there is no hope of attaining it through wealth. Then Maitreyi said, What would I do with that by which I do not become immortal? I have no use for it. Instead, venerable sir, tell me what you know about the way to attain immortality. Yagyavalkya replied, Maitreya, you have always been dear to me even before, and you now speak words which are music to my ears. Come, sit next to me, and I will explain to you about the way to attain immortality. And even as I tell you, reflect on what I say. Yagyavalkya began, Maitreyi, understand this. We do not love people or things for their sake or for what they are. We love them for our own sake. We love them for the sake of our own self. Therefore, the husband is not loved because he is a husband. He is loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. The wife is not loved because she is a wife. She is loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. The sons are not loved because they are sons. They are loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. Wealth is not loved because it is wealth. It is loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. Similarly, Brahminhood and Kshatriyahood are not dear because of what they are. They are dear for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. The worlds are not dear for their sake, for what they are. They are dear for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. The gods are not loved because they are gods. They are loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. Beings are not loved for their sake. They are loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. Similarly, all is not loved because of it being all. All is loved for our own sake, for the sake of our own self. Maitreyi, it is the self that should be realized. It is the self that should be heard, and it is the self that should be reflected and meditated upon. Truly, it is by realizing the self, it is by realizing the Atma, it is by hearing the self, it is by thinking of the self, it is by meditating on the self, and it is by understanding the self that all this is known, that everything here becomes known. The Brahmin and the Kshatriya ignore the one who know them as being different from the self, from the Atma. The worlds ignore the one who knows them as being different from the self. The gods ignore the one who knows them as being different from the self. The beings ignore the one who knows them as being different from the self. All ignore the one who knows all as being different from the self. This Brahmin, this Kshatriya, these worlds, these gods, these beings, and this all are only the self, are only the Atma. All of them are only the self, are only the Atma. When a drum is beaten, one is not able to grasp the external sounds, but by grasping the drum or by grasping the beater of the drum, the sound is grasped. When a conch is blown, one is not able to grasp its external sounds, but by grasping the conch or the blower of the conch, the sound is grasped. When the lute is played, one is not able to grasp its external sound, but by grasping the lute or the player of the lute, the sound is grasped. From a fire lighted with damp fuel, various kinds of clouds of smoke come out. Similarly, my dear, the Rig Ved, the Yajurved, the Samved, Atharva Angiras, history, ancient lore, science, Upanishads, verses, aphorisms and sayings, explanations and commentaries, all these have come out of the self, all these have been breathed out from the self, from the Atma. The ocean is the one goal. The ocean is the one uniting place of all the waters. The skin is the one uniting place of all kinds of touch. The nostrils are the one uniting place of all kinds of smell. The tongue is the one uniting place of all kinds of tastes. The eye is the one uniting place of all kinds of forms. The ear is the one uniting place of all kinds of sounds. The mind is the one uniting place of all kinds of determinations and resolutions. The heart is the one goal, the one uniting place of all forms of knowledge. The hands are the one uniting place of all kinds of acts. The organ of generation is the one uniting place of all kinds of enjoyment. The excretory organ is the one uniting place of all evacuations. The feet are the one uniting place of all movements. And speech is the one uniting place, the one goal of all the Vedas. In the same way, the self, the Atma, is the one uniting place, is the one goal of all the beings. A lump of salt, when it is put in water, dissolves completely in the water and becomes one with it. And there would not be any salt as such to take hold of, as it were. But from wherever one may take the water, it would all taste salty. In the same way, too, does this great being, infinite, limitless, consist of nothing but knowledge. Beings arise out of the elements. Beings arise out of the elements as separate entities. When they attain oneness with the self, with the Atma, then this separateness of theirs is destroyed. Then on achieving oneness with the Atma, when one departs from this world, then there is no more knowledge. There is no more consciousness. This is what I have to say, my dear Maitreyi. So said Yagyavalkya. This confused Maitreyi, and she said, by saying that when he has departed, there is no more knowledge, there is no more consciousness, you have indeed confused me, venerable sir. Yagyavalkya replied, Maitreyi, I have not said anything confusing. What I have told you is enough for knowledge and understanding. Let me explain further. Remember this, that whenever and wherever there is duality, whenever there are two, as it were, it is then and then only that we have consciousness or we have knowledge of another. It is then and then only that we smell another. It is then and then only that we see another. It is then and then only that we hear another. It is then and then only that we speak to another. It is then and then only that we think of another. And it is then and then only that we understand another. Where Maitreyi, however, unity and oneness with the self has been attained, and where everything has truly become the self, and when there is only one and none other, then by what and whom should one smell? Then by what and whom should one see? Then by what and whom should one hear? Then by what or whom should one speak to? Then by what and about whom should one think? And then by what and whom should one understand? By what should one know that by which all this is known? By what, my dear, Should one know the knower? Earth is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this earth. This shining immortal person who is in this earth, and the shining immortal person who is in the bodies of all beings, he is only the self, the Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. This water is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this water. This shining immortal person who is in this water, and the shining immortal person who exists as seed in the body of beings, they are both only this self, the Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. Fire is like honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey for this fire. This shining immortal person who is in this fire, and this shining immortal person who exists as speech in all beings, he is only this self, this Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. Air is like honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey for this air. The shining immortal person who is in this air, and the shining immortal person who is in the breath in all beings, he is just this self. He is just this Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. The sun is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for the sun. The shining immortal being who is in the sun, and the shining immortal person who is in the eye of all beings when they see, he is just the self, the Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. The quarters of space are like honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey for the quarters of space. The shining immortal person who is in these quarters, and the shining immortal person who is in the organ of the ear of all beings at the time of hearing, he is just this self, this Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. The moon is like honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey for the moon. The shining immortal person who is in this moon, and the shining immortal person who is in the mind of all beings, he is just the self, the Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. The lightning is like honey to all beings, and all beings are like lightning, are like honey for this lightning. The shining immortal person who is in this lightning, and the shining immortal person who is in the light, he is just the self, the Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. The cloud is like honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey for this cloud. This shining immortal person in the cloud, and the shining immortal person who is in the sound and in the tone of all beings, he is only the self, the Atma. He is the immortal. He is Brahm. He is all. Ether of space is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this ether, this space. The shining immortal person who is in this space, and the shining immortal person who is in the space in the heart of all beings, he is only the self. He is only the Atma. He is the immortal. He is Brahm. He is all. Dharma or law or righteousness is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this dharma. The shining immortal person who is in this law, in this dharma, and the shining immortal person who exists as law abidingness in all beings, he is only the self, the Atma. He is the immortal. He is Brahm. He is all. Truth is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this truth. The shining immortal person who is in this truth, and the shining immortal person who exists as truthfulness in all beings, he is only the self, the Atma. He is the immortal. He is Brahm. He is all. Mankind is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this mankind. The shining immortal person who is in this mankind, and the shining immortal person who exists as a human being, he is only the self, the Atma. He is the immortal. He is Brahm. He is all. This self, this Atma, is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this self, for this Atma. The shining immortal person who is in this self, who is in this Atma, and the shining immortal person who is in this individual self. He is only this self, this Atma. This is the immortal. This is Brahm. This is all. This self, this Atma, is the Lord, is the King, and the ruler of all beings. Just as all the spokes of a wheel are held together in the hub and the felly of the wheel, so are all beings, all gods, all worlds, all breathing creatures, and all individual selves held together in this self, in this Atma. This is the honey doctrine which Dadhyan, versed in the Atharved, taught the Ashwin twins. Seeing this, the seer said, O Ashwins in human form, I make known that terrible deed of yours, which you did to get the honey doctrine from Dadhyan through the horse's head, even as thunder makes known the coming rain. This is the honey doctrine, the meditation on things mutually helpful, which Dadhyan, versed in the Atharved, taught the Ashwin twins. Seeing this, the seer said, O Ashwins, you in human form put a horse's head on Dadhyan. He on his part kept his promise and taught you the honey of Twastri, which is your secret, through the horse's head itself. This truly is the honey doctrine, the meditation on things mutually helpful, which Dadhyan taught to the two Ashwins. Seeing this, the seer said, He made bodies with 2 feet and bodies with 4 feet, becoming a bird with a subtle body. The Supreme Being entered into all the bodies. On account of his dwelling in all bodies, he is called the Purush. There is nothing that is not covered by him. There is nothing that is not pervaded by him. This truly is the honey doctrine which Dadhyan taught to the two Ashwins. Seeing this, the seer said, He transformed himself into each and every form. This form of his was meant for making him known to all. Indra, the Lord, goes about in many forms by his magical powers. For him I yoked horses, which are the organs, by the hundreds and by the tens of hundreds. He is all the horses, he is all the organs, he is tens and he is thousands, he is very, very many, he is countless, he is infinite. Brahm is without an earlier, and Brahm is without a later. Brahm is without an inside, and Brahm is without an outside. Brahm is the self, Brahm is the Atma. He is the all pervading, he is the all perceiving. This is the teaching. Now we come to the line of teachers. Potimasya received this teaching from Gopavan, who received it from another Potimasya, who received it from another Gopavan, who received it from Kaushik, till we come to the Ashwins, who received the teaching from Dadhyan, who got it from Atharvan Deva, who got it from Mrityu Pradvaman's son, who got it from Ekarsi, who got it from Viprachitti, who received it from Vyasti, who received it from Sanaru, who received it from Sanatan, who got it from Sanag, who received it from Parameshthan, who is Viraj, who in turn got it from Brahma himself. Brahma is self-born. Salutation to Brahma. End of chapter 2, end of Madhu Kanda, end of part 6 of 15. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om.